Welcome back to the Value Blueprint, the podcast where we uncover the strategies, tools, and mindsets that help leaders build businesses with real lasting value. My name is James Grieve, and I'm joined by my co-host Shayla McLean. And today we're thrilled to have David Munro, Manufacturing Consortium Manager of BC for the Excellence in Manufacturing Consortium, joining us. Today we'll be talking about one of the biggest challenges facing the Canadian manufacturing industry today, building and retaining a skilled workforce amid uncertainty. EMC's latest Workforce Pulse report shows cautious optimism, but also real pressure on employers to find talent, boost productivity, and plan for the future. Welcome to the podcast, David. How are you doing today?
Very good. Thank you. And thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure to connect with you. Maybe to get us started, David, tell a little bit about yourself and your role with EMC and what EMC is, and then we can get right into the finer details here.
Sure, thanks. So Excellence in Manufacturing Consortium is an industry-driven nonprofit that started in the 80s in Owen Sound, Ontario. A group of 18 manufacturers got together. They're quite a distance from the city centers, and so they got together for peer-to-peer sharing purposes, and that grew into a kind of a regional nonprofit, and today it's a national nonprofit with we've got staff in just about every province across Canada. Provide a variety of services and resources, everything from training to wage subsidies to real-time stats and data, and lots of events where you can learn and network from your peers. So that's a little bit about EMC, a little bit about me. So, I learned about EMC probably 20 years ago now when I was doing economic development for the city of Chilliwack. So that's my background and agriculture. And I thought, wow, this organization sure offers a ton of stuff. And anyway, fast forward 20 years later, they called me and asked if I'd be willing to, at the time, help build Western Canada with a focus on BC. So it's really, really interesting. Again, my background is all over the place, manufacturing. I grew up in the forestry sector and the agriculture sector, and then spent many, many years trying to either help or attract manufacturers to two of BC's largest communities. So it goes way back. It's quite an interesting gig. I always enjoy working with the manufacturing sector.
Well, you're doing great work there, and we're certainly, as Value Builder, happy to be a proud partner and supporter of the EMC. So keep up the great work there. Maybe, David, if you could build on this by giving us a snapshot of what the Workforce Pulse report is and what it tells us about the current state of the manufacturing sector.
Sure. So, one of the things that EMC prides itself on is bringing out real data and stuff that people can make decisions with. One of the big faults that we always hear is the data, the time a business gets it, is 5 years old. Or quite often they're buying packages of information from, the US that have been repackaged and it's still 5-year-old data. So, and we've developed platforms to generate real-time stats. The Workforce Plus initiative it's a first of its kind initiative in the sense that we partnered with 14 other sectoral groups and workforce development groups to do a survey across Canada looking at key economic sectors. So, I'm not going to go through them all, but tourism, agriculture, bio, metal, you name it. It's quite interesting because, we've been doing a lot more work on that front, collaborating, if you wish, is the term. Because why are organizations representing industries going to do it 10 times, or in this case, 14 times? We can partner together. We're asking all the same questions and do one big survey. So that's, that's pretty, it's not a revolutionary thought, but it's, getting everybody to work together isn't always as easy as it sounds, right? And in this case, there was over 2,100 businesses that were surveyed, 815 or 16 of them were manufacturers. So it allowed us to get down to some of the data. I think, and when we look at it for the manufacturing sector, about 90% were SMEs. So, that's a big component of businesses across Canada, as you know. So, and the study itself, it came at a time when, there was a lot of turbulence when you look at what was going on. The U.S.-Canada trade relations and the tariffs and businesses, what do I do? Where do I go? Things were changing on the spot. So, so we, it was a good time to do it. And, a lot of the stuff that we found from the survey is folks that are in industry wouldn't necessarily be surprised, right? We, obviously, there's people didn't, the tariffs were creating, questions for businesses, what do I do next? Or should I invest in this? What about supply chain partners, shortages in skilled trades? And those are other things. And the big thing, which we kind of worked around here in the discussion, is planning uncertainty. Businesses didn't necessarily know where to proceed, how to proceed. And so that kind of created, throughout the, it was interesting because it created that kind of, for the manufacturing sector specifically, you're kind of not knowing where to go, right? And I think that created some angst, I guess is the term we're looking for there. So, but yeah, a pretty interesting survey. There's lots of detail we can discuss, but maybe that's
was there anything that particularly surprised you from that? I mean, it's such a great resource, so much data, so many great partners there. Was any, there's certain things going on there, like the optimism in the industry, hiring pressure, you mentioned tariffs, or the continued skills gap. Anything of those that really surprised you, that really stood out?
I guess, I mean, we had to, as an organization, when the tariffs came out, just give you some background, I guess we had to kind of stop and change our direction, because all of a sudden, we started to have to pay attention to businesses that, what is the percentage of, that we started asking questions, what is your percentage exporting to the US? What's the percentage exporting to other countries? And how much business is done in Canada? And yeah, sure, we might have talked about those questions before, but they became to the forefront. And so I think, for us, because, for example, if you got wage subsidy programs, there's no use finding someone who's selling 75% of their product to the US, because they're probably not going to hire people, right? Whereas if they're domestic, right, so they'd still be growing. So I think overall, the kind of the, this was looking at, I think, a 90-day or 3 months kind of outlook. And most of the businesses, I think the term was 80%, I think the number was 80%. We're still looking at hiring, maintaining, or expanding their staff. And given the circumstances and, the not knowing where the cards were going to lay, I think that one really jumped out at me. A lot of the other stuff, I would say, working with industry at the ground level, you're hearing a fair amount of it. But I think people were, even with all the confusion and all the different things that were going on, they're most 80% are still looking at staying the course, right? So I think that was probably the big piece for me. Lots of other little tidbits, but that's the people were still making their decisions as if things were normal, I guess.
Yeah, you have to have that continuity in the business.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly.
Wow. And, another thing that I noticed in that report is that it kind of highlighted about 35% of manufacturers are understaffed right now, with skilled trades and technical roles being the hardest to fill. Is that what you're hearing from other manufacturers right now as well?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And I think, this goes back to, it's just digressing a little bit from the study itself, but when we look at wider EMC programming, when you talk about our wage subsidy programs, a large part of it is to show the next generation the types of careers that are available in manufacturing. And so, yes, that's related to, skilled trades. But if we look at it, I think, overall manufacturing is at about 70, we're tracking 75 to 80% capacity. So you're leaving 20% on the table. And now all of a sudden you're going to have, there's the end of the baby boomer generation is going to be retiring. So now all of a sudden you're going to lose another 10% or 15% of the workforce in the coming years. Now things might change a little bit. People might stay a little bit longer. But yeah, so all these factors are impacting, trying to introduce people to what manufacturing is. It may not be skilled trades. It might be in accounting. It might be, it's not skilled trades, but it's still skilled work.
Mm-hmm.
It might be in shipping and logistics. So I think there's been a shortage in skilled trades for quite a long time. And I think, going back, the point I was trying to make is that it's one of the things is the sector isn't necessarily on top of mind when you're going through career education and making your decisions. And we know that because we've done presentations to groups that advise the problems of PC youth, and they're not, we know stuff is made, but they don't necessarily know the breadth of the career types or the breadth of the subsectors within manufacturing, right? Everyone gets things are made, but do they know it's going from aerospace to food and beverage to automotive, right? And every plastics and everything in between. And then the point, Shayla, that I'm trying to make is they don't necessarily know that there's skill, like the skilled labor, skilled trades pays well, right? And so in school, and I'm not knocking it, but quite often we all went through it. It's talking about going to post-secondary, talking about becoming an accountant, become a lawyer, right? Have your own business, but it doesn't really talk too much about manufacturing. And I think that has a big impact on skilled trades, right? And the shortage.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember going through high school, and it was always like, are you doing sciences, English, or applied science of like, kinesiology, that kind of thing. It was never a conversation of different industries. And when I was recently on one of the EMC tours, and someone I think from your team said, if someone told me that I like doing crafts and that skill set could be applied in this, industry, in this role, maybe I would have looked into it. And that really resonated with me as well. And I know you said you shared, some examples of you guys going into schools, working with elementary school programs to do, fun activities of, what was the example you gave, like moving marshmallows or something?
Yeah, it's interesting because part of the idea is to introduce manufacturing as a career choice
Hmm.
at an earlier age, and so these wage subsidy programs are designed for that. I mean, they're all productive. They're trying to find ways to learn. But what you referenced there is we partnered in New Brunswick with their Center of Excellence, and they're taking the concept of manufacturing as a career to the elementary school level, right? And and you got to design it. And I think what I'd use was they're making cotton candy
There you
and
go.
gingerbread houses and stuff like that. But it's still something that gives them, in at their level, gives them the kind of introduces the concept. So it's pretty cool when you think about it, right? Like, because again, like when we went through school, we didn't, and I'm not knocking it, it just didn't
Mhm.
really have that type of programming around, right?
Absolutely. Now,
Absolutely.
sticking with that kind of, pain point, have you seen any businesses that are doing this well to kind of um, prepare for these staff shortages, or even how they're handling it right now when they're having these problems? What things have you seen that are kind of innovative in being able to handle this matter successfully?
Yeah, it varies. That's a good question. I mean, I think part of the thing when you look at skills shortages is the astute businesses are going to look at, okay, what are some areas where are we going to get some more employees, right? And so you look at newcomers, new Canadians, First Nations, um, women in manufacturing, right? And so like I think women in manufacturing is like 27% of the workforce. So right there, you can double that, you're adding quite a few folks. So the businesses that are doing good are doing creative um, marketing as part of their HR. They're not just throwing that thing on a website and saying, "Hey, come apply here." Some of them are looking at community aspects. Community dynamics. Come to our community. We've got a brand new facility. We've got a junior hockey team. We've got you know housing that's affordable, like those kinds of pieces. But also looking at flexibility within their organization itself. Like maybe you start on the production line and they find out that you're really, really interested in marketing. And so developing career paths, investing in training. I mean, that's a big piece. I can't remember the number, but I think the bulk of companies invest well below $1,000 in training, right? And so the smart companies are having a training program and taking that person that might be interested in um, that has the ability in them to become a supervisor, but maybe they're a little shy, or maybe they don't necessarily, they don't have the confidence. And so trying to invest in them and move them forward, finding things that they're interested in. One of the companies that stood out was a couple companies examples are one, when it comes to women in trades, right? And so their marketing campaigns for attracting folks are like, hey, um, this mom and daughter work in our welding department, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're hitting on, "Hey, come and work here. You don't have to be, you can be any gender to come and work here, right?" So,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's definitely um, proactive for one,
Mm-hmm.
and productive on another sense. And then I think, other companies as well. Like there was a company that I shared the story before. They were in Ontario in a remote area, and they found out one of their new Canadian employees was traveling 8 hours a day. Right? Couldn't
Wow.
nobody would sign up. They couldn't get a loan to get a car, and they were traveling 8 hours a day to get to work in public transit. And so the owner found out about it, went to the bank, and they, they're conservative, we'll say it that way. And so
Yeah.
the owner encouraged them, that's a nice way of saying it, to come up with a plan. And so basically the company co-signed for the car. And so the individual could get a car and cut down. And so he had more family time. And so he's proud of that. And same thing, same time, folks are coming from other areas of the world. They're always very proud. And my mom's comes from other areas of the world. And they don't want handouts, they want to work for it. And so they designed
Yes.
it so that the individual is still paying towards it, and he's gonna own it. And so basically the business co-signed the loan, right? At other businesses, on the new Canadian side, that is one other business we work with. They don't even market their ads anymore. They go to their people and say, "Hey, we're looking for an aluminum welder. um, any of you have a relative in Mexico or wherever that
Mm-hmm.
can do this, and because we'd love to bring them here." So there's lots of creativity, and I think a lot of businesses are getting creative with social
Mm-hmm.
media, right, and
Mm-hmm.
telling the story differently, right?
I love that. I like the creative approach too, especially being, if someone's in the lower mainland, I love the idea of even carpooling, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you've got family members that want to kind of join in on this as well, like it's way more efficient to get to and from as well. So that's really neat to hear. Thanks for sharing that.
This is great, David. And what a great, showing this creativity and this proactive planning here. So when you talk about manufacturers, I mean, it's a wide gamut, right, of doing different things in different sizes. And, for the many of our listeners in our podcast here, it's small, medium-sized businesses, right? And they get advice, and we bring in these great subject matter experts like yourselves to provide advice on how small and mid-sized manufacturers can have a seat at the table. So many of them don't have HR teams or an HR person on their team. How can they realistically plan ahead and get in tune with some of these proactive hiring, recruitment, training, retention plans to get ahead versus not as being well resourced like other larger companies are?
It's a very interesting point when it comes to HR, and it's I've actually started up a HR roundtable for British Columbia, and part of the reason that I did it is I was getting questions from a lot of HR folks, because what you're seeing is a lot of SMEs are now investing in HR,
Okay.
just because of the difficulties that trying to find skilled trades, trying to find there's wage subsidy programs. You really, it's in current times, you really can't have someone doing that off the side of the desk. It doesn't get done, or it doesn't get done, something always becomes a priority, right? And so what I found was there's HR people, and God bless them, but they're coming from other sectors, so retail or what have you, and so we're getting questions, or I was getting questions, because and I'm not picking on retail, but someone doesn't call in on retail, you phone someone else. Someone in manufacturing calls in sick. If you don't have cross training and a backup, your line's down, and it's costing you tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So those, so I'm not diverting from your question, but the question is that I'm seeing more companies make investments in, they don't, maybe it's 50 employees and they still got someone that's doing HR. It may not be a full time, it might be HR and admin, but there's still, or some people HR and doing grants or whatever it may be, right? So there's definitely those things. And I think, as far as um, getting into, accessing resources, I don't want to make it all about EMC, but there's lots of subsector organizations or EMC and other organizations like that that provide training and wage subsidies and peer-to-peer sharing networks. And that's the engage with one of those company, one of those nonprofits or those organizations. I think that's a great way to learn from your peers. Great way to access resources, is a great way to build a network. But like I said, years ago, I worked at a chamber of commerce. And the one thing I always like to tell people, just don't join and think it's going to come to you, right? If you're going to
Yeah.
join, then you have to participate. You have to open the newsletters and go to the events, right? And ask questions, right? There's no silly questions in this world, believe me. And when it comes to planning ahead, I think these are the types of things, because all of a sudden you're doing webinars on government funding for manufacturers, or you're doing webinars on the SR&D tax changes or what legislation changes are coming in on a legal aspect. You have the ability to join in on these kinds of things and learn, which helps you plan and helps you kind of prepare for the future. Like we brought in a person to do basically, they're not an EMC employee, but they're in-house in the sense that we hire them to provide webinars on all the tariff changes, right? Because we're not educated to do it. All of a sudden now we've got a customs broker who's been dealing with this every day for a whole career, and he can give really good advice. All of a sudden you join a webinar for that, and you can maybe get some tidbits that help you. Okay, well, my product is it's covered under CUSMA, even though that may go away in the future, but it's covered by CUSMA. Oh, I got aluminum products. Right. So there's those kind of things that I think that you the opportunities to plan. And I think the other piece is, people underestimate the peer-to-peer side. It's being able to ask one of your cohort of businesses that have already done it, right? Like if you can pick up the phone and call ABC Manufacturing, and they just finished exporting all this stuff, and they've figured out, what the do's and the don'ts are. The other piece, for me is SMEs need to start looking at diversifying their market, right? So, not only, yes, Canada's looking at reducing interprovincial trade barriers, and that's long overdue. But if your product can be used in Korea, can be used in the UK, well, then you should be knocking on the doors of the province and the federal government, because they've got resources that are in those countries, right? They got people on the ground that speak that language. And so I think those kinds of things, drifting a little bit, but there's lots of different types of resources. And that actually came up in the study, when you start looking at market diversification, right? So yes, US is close, and it's always going to be a bigger trading partner, right? It's just, there's a rough patch right now, and, we'll get through it. But all of a sudden, if you've got 15% there, 60% in Canada, another 15% in Asia, then your breadbasket is diversified a little bit. And I think those are the things folks have to kind of look at. So same as hiring staff, right? Like it's the same way.
100%. Well, that's one of the things we talk about with our clients is we look at, one of the risks is customer concentration, right? If you have too much of your eggs in one basket, as you mentioned, it could certainly be a risk to your business. I really like what you said about, EMC being an ecosystem. It takes all of us to bridge this gap from insight to action too. And as you look ahead for, some of the biggest opportunities for manufacturers in investing in their people, you touched on a little bit earlier, of doing things maybe they're just a little bit outside the box, but being creative with people. But let's lean in on some preparing for the next generation of workers. So how can industry leaders or people who have all sizes of business and manufacturing prepare for the next generation of workers, whether it's training, technology, culture? Here's some quick thoughts on that, if you will, for us, David.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the thing is doing a check to make sure that you are a employer of choice in a sense that have a look around, how diverse is your group, when you look at age and where people are coming from and all these kinds of things. I think that's a first kind of step to it. When I look at trying to engage youth is be flexible, right? And so, like when we grew up, it was more work. Now it's a little bit more work balance with play and family, and it's neither one is right or wrong. It's just you have to stay with the changing times. And I think, like some of the things we're finding out with these wage subsidy programs, like we have a program with the province of BC, and it basically just you can get a $3,500 wage subsidy to the business to bring in a youth to help them in some capacity, but also so the youth can learn. And there's lots of flexibility. The province has been great with that program. But we had cases where someone came in and they were going to be a production worker, and all of a sudden they're redoing their social media because they have
Oh.
skill sets in that, right? So,
Yeah, right.
so the youth is going to be probably more inclined to know social media and know how to do things than some old gray haired guy like me, right? So, so maybe they take advantage of that, right? The same thing as one of the stories we had was, and I exaggerate the story a little bit, but it's a youth came in for another role, and all of a sudden I think they got their first check, and look, did you print this on a dot matrix printer? How old is your accounting system, right? And they completely rebuilt and modernized their accounting systems.
Wow.
It doesn't always work out like that, but they're having the ability to adapt. I'll give you an example. A company, and they're in the aerospace sector, and they were having a really hard time with people using the lifts because they're refurbishing big planes, right? And so the youth were having a hard time. They were whether nervous or whatever. Their injuries. There's risk of injuries were happening and all these things. So what they did is they went and made a $30,000 investment, and they bought a trainer, which is virtual with controls similar to what youth would use in their gaming stuff, and it was all virtual, and they could figure out how to use the lift. It was all designed so they could access it and learn it, and it completely the training time once they hit the floor was completely reduced. The health and safety risks were completely not completely, but reduced significantly, right? Because they changed the way they were training, right? So,
Nice.
So that's a thing. There's lots of different ways you can do that. Being open, being flexible, trying to find ways that to connect with them. Being, there's every generation has their good and bad, right? There's
Right.
you have to be patient. I know the younger generation wants to be the CEO as soon as they walk in the door, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
maybe help guide them there and set out a plan. And a lot of them want to learn different things and try different things. So give that flexibility within your work environment. So there's tons of examples, but I think and then when I always think about the loyalty that business that I mentioned, that they go to their people first, right? They've
Right.
built up a great culture of their welcoming culture, and so and they help with the process and all these things. And so when for them, they built up a culture just like the company that went and helped their employee get a car, right? Like you'll have that person's loyalty, you have that person recommending whether it is to a youth or new Canadian or one of their friends to come and work there, right? So I think that will help. Companies that are going to do that kind of thing are going to help.
It's transformational for sure.
Exactly. And the same token, you have to understand, with youth too, like the idea with these wage subsidy programs is to try it out. And
Right.
manufacturing is not going to be for everybody, and that's okay, right?
Mhm.
But at least they tried it out. And maybe shipping and receiving isn't what this person wants to do, but man, they sure like sales. So again, going back to that, there's creativity. I know a lot of sounds like we're hitting the same words, but creativity, flexibility, being innovative and welcoming. Like there's all these different types of things. I think there's a different expectation from youth where they're going to work. The other piece, just to throw out there is, in our experience, they want to work for companies that are going to give back, right?
Mhm.
Whether
Right.
it's to the community or whether it's environmentally, making sure that they're reducing their environmental footprint and those kind of things. So if you want to attract the next generation, you have to make it attractive to them. I know it sounds simple, but what are some of the things that they're looking for, right?
Absolutely.
exactly.
And I love that this links back to, organizations like EMC of, how can you be innovative in your business? And the best way to start with that is hearing what other people are doing and drawing inspiration from one another to then create these opportunities of how you're handling the problem at hand. So thank you for sharing. And David, just kind of in wrapping things up, if there is one first step that you'd kind of recommend to manufacturers that feel a bit stuck right now or looking ahead to kind of future plan their business, what would that be?
That's a good question. I think um, the first thing I would do is take a step back and do kind of a self assessment, right? Like so, like go back and look at, okay, where are majority of our products being sold, right? And a lot of businesses know, some may not, right? Then all of a sudden, okay, well, we're domestic, right? So that means that can allows you to plan, because if you're more or less a domestic manufacturer, right? Um, then you are going to have you're not going to be hit with the ebbs and flows so much, right? If you're primarily sending stuff to the US, well, then you maybe take a step back and maybe I better engage. I think the big piece is engagement. Engage and try to find out, okay, well, what other countries would use my widgets? Well, hey, Romania or whatever, and then find out how do I go about developing that market, right? And what resources can I tap into? I think that's a big piece. And the other piece is, when I say engage, being engaged is, it's really easy. I've been there. We all are. You got 17 priorities, and you're trying to deal with the fire that's in front of you. Sometimes if you take a step back and say, hey, maybe I should do that little piece that's on the corner of my desk. Maybe I should take the time to go out to the Manufacturing Excellence Forum that EMC is hosting, right? I can meet James and Shayla. I can network. I can learn from, one of the universities that's doing a presentation. So I think knowledge, again, knowledge is another piece. Engagement is another, I mentioned that before. Not being, try new things. Not everything's going to work, right? But if maybe have a look at your website. Is it attractive? Does it look like a website from 1990? Well, if it is, then you're not going to attract new workers, younger workers, right? Supply chain partnerships. How are your supply chain partnerships? We never really touched on that, but in the times of COVID, in the times of tariffs, if James knows David and I'm looking for hinges for my cabinets and he doesn't know Shayla, the chances are I'm going to get those hinges before Shayla does. Right. So those kind of supply chain partnerships and also, connecting with those partners to say, hey, well, I can also manufacture that, or I got a machine that can measure those component parts for you, and kind of develop those so you're developing that network. So anyway, Shayla, I jumped all over the place there, but
No, I like
there's
that.
tons of things that you can do. I think it's just, the first thing is look at, what are you doing really well? And sometimes, what are some things that maybe you're not doing bad on, but you don't necessarily have someone on the team that has that expertise. Like maybe, if you really think that South Korea is going to be a market for you, maybe when you're hiring in the future, maybe look at someone that's bilingual, right? So,
Right.
like there's tons of those kinds of things. And I didn't give you one thing. I don't think one thing. I mean, there's so many. There's not really one one bullet that will answer everything.
Never.
Right?
Yeah.
But there's lots of things, and I think just I think the most powerful thing I've seen is, like what for me that's helping industry, when I take a step back and just get out of the way, the power of personal relationships and, and staying connected. And, I had a guy laugh at me when I said it in a presentation that, make sure you have good relationships with your supply chain partners. Right. And that doesn't mean just take them out for a beer once every year. Hey, how's your kids doing? Hey, oh, hey, I'm going to be in Edmonton next week. Are you going to be around? Right. Take it for lunch or whatever. Right. Like there's more to it. Don't take it. Don't like anything. It's like, don't take it for granted. Right.
Absolutely. No,
Absolutely.
that's great. I feel like that's like 2 minutes that people should just loop back and and take all of the pieces of wisdom there. There's definitely a lot of key points, but like you said, it's multifaceted and coming at it from a collaborative approach and holistic approach at looking at all the pieces, right, and how they fit together. So I think that was really well summarized, considering it was a very open-ended question, a very loaded question. For people listening that want to get involved with EMC or access some of these insights from the Workforce Pulse report that we've discussed today, what's a way that they can connect with you or follow up post conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I'd go to the EMC website. If you just type in British Columbia, it'll bring you to the page where I have my fancy beard, and you'll have a chance to look at some of the upcoming events. My contact information is there as well. You can always send me an email and see what's going on. And yeah, there's no, like I said, there's no silly questions, but that's where I'd start. Or go to the LinkedIn page for myself or for EMC. And there's lots of resources out there that can help manufacturers. I think part of the problem sometimes is not everybody knows about them or where to find them. And
That's great.
we help with that. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think if anything, a summary of our conversation today is that, manufacturers are optimistic, but they're stretched. And now is kind of that time to plan for long-term stability. Workforce challenges can become an opportunity when companies invest in leadership, training, and strategy, and collaboration between these industries, between educators, between partners like EMC are going to be that key into building that future-ready workforce. So thank you, David, so much for joining us today. For those listening, make sure you subscribe to the Value Blueprint podcast to hear more from our experts in the coming weeks. Share this episode with business owners or manufacturing leaders in your network, and make sure to check out EMC's Workforce Pulse report for deeper insights into our conversation. Thanks again, David, and we appreciate your time today.
Oh, thank you both.